Hello, it's Rabbi Chaim here, Chabad of the West Side, with a quick running commentary on this week's Shabbos Parshas Yisro. It is also the special time where the woman of the world, the Shluchot, the Chabad emissary, female emissaries of the world, are gathering together in Crown Heights and other places for their annual conference. And I'm going to share a quick thought about the Ten Commandments, and then we're going to do number 4 of 1227 of the project. And in the Ten Commandments, the very first letter is Anochi. In this week's Torah portion, we have the Ten Commandments. Anochi is the Aleph of Anochi. Aleph. The Rebbe repeated this many times in different ways. They said that the Alter Rebbe taught, what is an Aleph? When you teach somebody what an Aleph is, what is the beginning of everything? He said an Aleph is a dot on the top, or a little yud on the top, a dot on the bottom, a little yud at the bottom, the smallest letter, and a line of God, of Yir'at Shamayim, and which loosely translates as our fear or respect of God in the middle that connects us. And the Rebbe explained in a few different ways what this Aleph means. And then he said also, the dot at the top is our soul, and the dot at the bottom of the Aleph is our body, and the line that connects us is our Torah, our connection to God, our faith, that which connects us to God. And one of the reasons why it's a dot, just a little dot, a little yud at the top and at the bottom, is because we recognize that whatever we understand about God is nothing. That's why it's a dot. It's only represented by this one little dot or one little yud, because we can't understand God or God's ways. And so too, that brings humility to us, and we at the bottom, we're also a little dot, because if you truly recognize how great God is and our relationship with God is that we have a relationship with God, it makes us humble, truly humble. And that's the dot at the bottom. That's how small we are. So dot at the top is God, our soul. Dot at the bottom is the Jew, or our body. And the line that connects us is the Torah and our faith. And that's the Aleph. It's the first letter of the Ten Commandments. And it's the beginning of everything. It's the first letter of the whole alphabet. Moving on. This Sikha, this talk from the Rebbe in the project Likutei Sichos, talks about Shabbos. It says that, why do we rest on Shabbos? It's one of the Ten Commandments. It's Sheishet Yamim Tiyasem Lecha. For 6 days you should do your work. Yom HaShvi'i Shabbat LaHashem Elokecha. The 7th day, Shabbat LaHashem Elokecha. It is Shabbat for God your God. The Rebbe, in a very lengthy, very scholarly talk, the Rebbe talks about this. I'm going to extract just the one relevant point that is really cool. The Rebbe says, the Gemara, the Talmud says, Shabbat LaHashem Elokecha. It's Shabbat for God, your God. But let's change the word, the letter, or the vowels, and we'll read it Shevot Ka Hashem Elokecha, which means rest, observe the Shabbat, just like God, your God, observes the Shabbat. And then the Talmud goes on and says, God didn't create on Shabbat, he stopped creating, so we stop from physical creation. That's a biblical commandment, to stop working on Shabbat. Then it says, but how did God create? God created through his speech, and God said, let there be this, that, and the other, and everything in between. So too, says the Talmud, that, and the Rebbe explains this, that we have this rabbinic decree, as it's called, or a strong suggestion, that we also don't talk about, we don't use our lips about talking about work on Shabbat, because God created using words, so he affected the physical with his words. We don't affect the physical. We don't talk about the physical using our words on Shabbat. We don't talk about work on Shabbat. Then the Talmud says that there's a story about a person who was walking by his fence. Here's the fence, always. And he saw on Shabbat, he noticed a hole in his fence. Well, I think it was a wooden fence in the times of the Talmud. And he thought to himself, oh, I need to fix it. And then he said, oh my gosh, I just thought about work on Shabbat. I'm never going to fix that fence. I'm going to leave it as it is. And he did. And the Talmud calls him a chassid, a pious one. So the Rebbe says over here that there's 3 levels of Shabbat observance. There's biblical, you can't do the work. There's rabbinic, we can't talk about work. And then there's the pious, we don't think about work on Shabbat. 3 levels, biblical, rabbinic, pious. In Hebrew it's called a chassid, which is, we're all chassidim today, chassidim of the Rebbe, but the chassid that it's talking about over there is the pious one, one who goes beyond the measure of the law. And the Rebbe explains that in God's creation, where he created things, he created the physical world, and he created through speech. Speech is an expression of something that's inside, and that is, it reveals that which is hidden. So through the speech, God created the things that we can see and touch and feel, the physical. And then through thought is also an expression of what's inside, but it stays in. So through thought, God's thought also created, but it didn't create physical beings. It created matters of the spirit, the spiritual realm, the spiritual world, the angels, anything spiritual was created through God's thought. Anything physical was created through God's speech. And one of the main differences in this is that between speech and thought is that the things that are created through God's speech, well, they feel separate from God because once you talk, kind of the words are out already. But there's still some ability to connect with God. They have an ability to refine themselves in order to recognize their source. Whereas most of the creation doesn't necessarily feel that it's a God creation, that it doesn't feel its source. That's speech. Thought is something that is completely inside of us, inside our head. It doesn't leave our head. So too, and when God created thought, it's the things that God created through thought are beings that completely feel God's presence. They don't feel like they're outside of God at all. They just feel like, oh, I'm part of God. I'm in God. I am godly. So those spiritual worlds they resonate godliness, and there's nothing separate about them. Now, what's its relevance to these 3 levels in our life? The Rebbe said so too when we observe Shabbos. There's the commandment to observe Shabbos. And the way we always look at our relationship with God is the way we look at our relationship with our spouse, our child, our parent. So I'm going to put into very simple terms, one that we use all the time. Corny as it may seem. Your wife tells you to take out the garbage. That's a command. God said don't work on Shabbos. That's a command. That's biblical. You take out the garbage or you're toast. We don't work on Shabbos. End of story. That's biblical. Raise it a little higher. Rabbinic. We don't speak words about work on Shabbos. That's a rabbinic. That shows a little bit more connection and passion to the relationship. So God said don't work on Shabbos. We'll say, okay, we're going to take it a step higher. We're not going to talk about the work on Shabbos. Like your wife tells you, take out the garbage. And sometimes you leave a mess. When you take out the garbage, this time you clean it up. Or you clean up the counters too. Or you put another garbage bag in that garbage bin. So there you did a little bit more. You're showing a little passion, a little more of a relationship with your wife when you do that, or with God when you don't speak about the work that He forbade us to do. Then we have the 3rd level, and that's the thought. We don't even think about work on Shabbos. That's the level of a pious person who doesn't feel himself at all. Just feels, what does God want? What does my wife want? So this is a person who maybe figuratively His wife doesn't even have to tell him anymore to take out the garbage. He takes out the garbage, cleans up the countertop and the kitchen, and he prepares a meal for his wife, and he prepares food. He does extra, and he does something extraordinary. He just feels what she feels what she wants, and is in tune and aligned with what she needs or what she wants before she asks him. And so too with our abstaining from thought, from thinking about work on Shabbos. The Rebbe says this is a person who's completely aligned with God. God rested from creation. He didn't tell us don't think about work on Shabbos, but because he did it, those who feel aligned with him also do it. God bless you. I think I neglected to say before that the reason why the women are coming together is because it's the Rebbitzins, the Yahrzeit, the anniversary of the passing of the Rebbe's wife, Rebbitzin Chaya Mushka. God bless you all. Have a good Shabbos. Be in touch.